We've officially hit the point in the gardening season where the amount of garden goodies that we're harvesting and getting from the garden has exceeded the pace that I'm able to eat them at. So in today's video, I'm gonna walk you through 3 super simple, super easy preservation techniques. And the very first one that we're going to get started with is simply drying our garden goodies. And when it comes to drying, there's 2 ways that we're able to go about it. And so the first we're gonna walk through is air drying. And so to get started with this technique, we need to harvest a bunch of goodies from the garden. Now, when it comes to air drying, this works incredibly well with our herbs. So think mint, oregano, chives, sage, and more. The reason why is because they have a low moisture content versus something like our tomatoes and our zucchinis have a much higher moisture content. So we're going to use different preservation methods for those with a higher moisture content. Now, once we've harvested a bunch of herbs, all that we need to do is grab a bunch of them, such as this mint here, and remove all of the leaves on the bottom 3 to 4 inches of the stem. And once removed, simply grab a piece of twine or string and wrap that around the base of the plant. And after that, all you need to do is hang it up somewhere inside your house or garage where it's nice and dry for 10 to 14 days. During this time, the moisture will be drying out from the leaves, and after 10 to 14 days, you'll end up with a beautiful bunch of dried herbs. So at that point, simply pop them off the hook and begin harvesting or removing the individual leaves from the stem and place those into a mason jar for storage into the fall and winter. But what about those vegetables that are higher in moisture content? Well, the second drying method is utilizing a dehydrator, and what this is going to do is blow warm air across those vegetables, which allows us to dry out some of our vegetables that do have a higher moisture content. So the first thing we need to do is grab some vegetables with more moisture in them, such as garlic, zucchini, and kale. But what's really cool about this method is we can take literally things that we buy from the grocery store and dehydrate those as well. So I'm also going to do some apple, some banana, and some pineapples. So to prep each of the vegetables, I'm going to cut them as thin as possible. And the reason for this is because the more surface area that is exposed, the better they'll dry. And then once chopped up, I'm just gonna pop them onto the dehydrator racks, and then I'm going to turn the dehydrator on at a temperature of 140 Fahrenheit, and I'm gonna let it run for 12 hours. But how do you know when they're fully dried? Well, you can grab one of the slices, such as this garlic, and if there's still a bend in it, then there's still moisture in it, and you want to put it back in the dehydrator for longer. And after a few more hours, check again, and what you're looking for is to see if it's brittle and actually snapping when you bend it. And at that point, you know it's done and you can start storing it. Now, you could store them as they are, but what I actually like to do is to grind them down into powders. And so to do that, I'm gonna take the garlic and pop it into my spice grinder and blend it up until it's a nice powder. And once it's done, I've got beautiful garlic powder from my garden to be adding to dishes all winter long. Now, with the other goodies, you could be doing kale chips, zucchini chips, apple, banana chips, or what I'm experimenting with is actually blending all of these up to create a homemade greens powder for starting each day. Now, I've only recently started experimenting with this greens powder, so I don't have any recipes to share just yet. But with that being said, I do encourage you to also experiment and play around to see which methods you enjoy the most. Speaking of, it's time for us to move on to our second preservation method, which is this right here, the root cellar. And these have hands down become my favorite way to go about preserving and storing my rooted crops. And effectively, all that we're trying to do is utilize a medium to protect our rooted crops from the air so they don't shrivel up and rot as quickly as they would if they were just sitting on a shelf. But there are a couple of variables that are going to really impact how long these vegetables preserve and stay good for. So in order to set our root cellar up, the first thing that we need to do is, of course, harvest some vegetables such as these potatoes right here, as well as some of the carrots that are coming out of the garden. And now once harvested, what you want to do is remove all of the foliage on them so that we're only working with the root itself. And with the foliage removed, we then want to place them on either a shelf or some chicken wire in a dry area for 7 to 10 days. During this time, they're gonna form a bit of an outside skin that's going to protect them as we put them into preservation and help them stay good for an even longer period of time. Now, after those 7 to 10 days, we need to get them into some form of a medium. But what medium is best? And this is something that I experimented with a ton this past year. So back in the fall, I took 4 boxes and I put the exact same vegetables into each one of those boxes. The only difference is that I used a different medium in each box for storing and preserving those rooted vegetables. So in one box, I utilized sand. In the next box, I utilized garden soil, and in the third box, I utilized sawdust. And lastly, I had a fourth box, but this one I put no medium in to just serve as our control. And then 3 months later, I opened them up to see how they did, and the one with no medium in it really struggled and was really shriveled up. And on the other hand, the rooted vegetables that were stored in garden soil did absolutely amazing. They were still super firm, super crisp, as if I had just harvested them that day. So with that being said, we gotta get some garden soil, and all that you need to do is grab a cardboard box or a plastic storage tote, head out to your garden and grab 1 to 2 inches of garden soil and place this at the bottom of the tote. Then we're going to grab our rooted crop and we're going to put a row of them down, and the critically important part here is to ensure that they're not touching at all. Once the first row is done, we're going to bury that with about 1 to 2 inches of soil, and then we're going to get started doing the exact same thing for a second row. And you're simply going to repeat this process until all of your rooted crops are stored away in their root cellar. And then the last thing that you want to do is place your root cellar in a cool and dry area. So for myself, that's my unheated garage where I've got them right here. The cooler the temperature, the longer that they're going to stay good for. So that is method number 2, which brings us to our third and final preservation method for today, and it is hands down the absolute easiest, and that is freezing. And once again, we're gonna harvest a bunch of our vegetables, and freezing works really well both for raw vegetables as well as vegetables that we've already processed into a recipe, such as some basil that we've turned into pesto. So once we have our vegetables on hand, the next thing that we want to do is give them a really good rinse to get any insects or dirt out of there before we begin the freezing process. Now after that, what you want to do is cut them into 1-inch pieces and place them onto a baking sheet or even onto some seed starting trays. And once you've processed all your vegetables, we're then going to place those trays into the freezer for 1 hour. Now, if I didn't place them on those trays to freeze individually and I just put them into the freezer, they would just freeze into one big giant ball that would be impossible to work with through the winter. But now, after 1 hour, what you're going to do is remove them from the freezer and grab a couple of bags, and now you're just going to move your frozen garden goodies into those individual bags and then place those bags back into the freezer for storage. Because now with each piece individually frozen, it's so easy at any point to come in there and grab a cup of carrots, a cup of beets, a cup of celery, and put together a nice roasted vegetable meal in the middle of wintertime. And voila, you now know everything that you need to in order to be drying your garden goodies for the fall and wintertime, using the freezer to preserve them, or even to build your own little mini root cellar for those rooted crops. So I really hope that this video has been helpful and valuable and has taught you something new. That's all for now. Can't wait to catch you on the next video.